Welcome to another video on our channel. In today's video, we're going to be focusing on basically learning how we can code and earn six figures using Python. Now, you might be wondering that, earning six figures is obviously a very monumental and difficult task in most circumstances. But learning about that, the pathway leading us to that particular focus is something that we need to focus on. And one of the easiest pathways for anyone to earn six figures is to learn how to code in Python. Previously, you might be thinking that what would be the time frame for this? Because every effort, every target must go through a certain time frame that we need to decide at the start. What is going to be the timeline within which we learn Python, and then we can start earning in six figures. And that particular timeline would be 1 year, in my opinion. A lot of you might be wondering that 1 year is too long, or 1 year is something that doesn't make sense. But it does make sense, right? If you only need to learn the fundamentals of Python and code in it and write scripts in it, that might be fine, and that might have been fine 2-3 years ago. But the fact is, now people who just know Python, there are plenty of them out there. Now you need to learn Python and specialize in one specific field of Python, get good at that, and that usually takes a year. And again, if you say 6 months, that's plausible, but again, you need to spend every single moment in your day learning about that. You can't do part-time learning like you would do in the 1 year timeline with your job and everything. But in this case, you would need to focus 101% in exactly how you can learn to how learning to code basically. So to start our conversation off, we need to focus on something very simple here. That is basically the start of our conversation here would be the fundamentals of coding in Python. So the first thing you need to do is to learn the fundamentals. So let's bring our pen over here, get any color here, and let's start writing. So when we talk about let's actually not define the arrow here first. So the first thing you need to focus on is the fundamentals. So when we talk about the fundamentals, let's write that down here. So while we're talking about that, so everything needs a foundation, and this is the foundation that most people can learn and think that they can start earning money in Python. But the thing is, this is basically wasn't true even before. You can't earn money just on fundamentals. Fundamentals give you the base on which you can further explore Python. They're very essential, very important. But other than importance, we also need to understand that fundamentals do not help you make a lot of money. So what would be that like with everything, like when we talked of 1 year here, let's write that down here as well. So our timeline is 1 year for this entire process, right? So given this timeline, given that we can earn six figures in a year through Python, what would be the time frame for fundamentals learning? And I think this should not exceed 2 to 3 weeks if you want to get really deep into it, right? That should be the amount of time that you need to spend. When we talk about fundamentals, we need to start by what are the different things and fundamentals of Python that we need to learn. So number one is going to be data types, variables, and operators. So data types, let me remove this, it was a little messy. So data types, I'm going to use DT as data types. Variables, I'm just var to refer to variables. And I think operators, right? That was the third thing I mentioned. Yeah, operators. So let's just use OPTR for operators. And again, I'm writing them quickly because I don't want to waste a lot of your time while I'm writing this through. So generally speaking, data types are the foundation of any programming language, right? You can imagine, just like in any English language, you learn ABCs. That's what data types are for a programming language. Similarly, variables are where you're going to store the knowledge that you want the program to process or learn or feed into basically. And operators are the actions basically. So basically, you learn the ABC, right? Then you need to basically memorize those words, memorize the language. That's variables, right? Learning ABCs is data types. Learning to remember those ABCs in a programming language, those are variables. And more importantly, operators are how you construct and create sentences in a programming language. So all of these three things need a lot of your focus and understanding before you can move ahead of these, right? So learning these are essential. So please focus on this with focus on this a lot. After that, the second thing we need to understand are control structures, right? So let's understand what control structures are. Basically, these are loops and conditions. I'm just going to say CTR CTR structures here, right? So these are loops and variables. So why are they control structures? So with every language, and especially with computing language, you need to understand there are certain decision-making processes that you need to make in the computing languages, right? How, if we get certain type of data type, how do we change it from one place to the other, and vice versa, right? How do we process that? How do we change that? How do we, for example, if we get a user clicks on the screen, how do we respond to that? All of that in any computing screen, even your UI that you're using and this keyboard where I'm writing, it has a control structure that determines that. So when I click and drag this around, that's when the control structure said if clicked, do this, which is add a color in the areas that the cursor moves through. But if it is not clicked, like here, it doesn't change anything because the mouse keeps on moving and it doesn't paint anything. So that is a control structure, and there are two things in control structure: loops and variables. When we talk about loops, they're continuous circles of program. So unless we exit out of the loop or we set up a condition through which we can exit out of the loop would keep on repeating itself over and over again until it is given the permission to exit. While conditionals are, if this is the situation, if we, like I talked about with this particular cursor here, where if the cursor is clicked and moved, then paint the pathway of the cursor. But if the cursor is not clicked and moved, don't paint anything. So those are basically control instructions, and they're very, very essential for you to get things done in a programming language. While data types, variables, and operators, are there to make sure that you are able to work with the language, right? Act on the language. But control structures are there that you can build a little more complicated decision-making steps within your code, which are essential because if you want to get things done in a code, you need to learn how to control how the code works and how decisions are made within the code. So with that done, the third thing you need to remember are functions and modules. That's the third thing you need to study in programming, which are functions and modules. So functions and modules are basically slightly different, but at the same time the same thing as well, right? So functions are these isolated modules of code that you write that are whose entire purpose is that you can reuse them over and over and again. So potentially I could write a piece of code that adds two digits together, addition, right? Basic arithmetic addition. I write a code that does that. So instead of me going to every single code, every single place where I need to do an addition operator, to write that addition operator over and over again, and that violates one of the core principles of programming, which is do not repeat your code. If I have to go over and over and do that, that would seem redundant and violates basic common sense coding principles. So the best way to avoid that is I code in one single place how the addition operation, right? Adding two digits together, and I just call that piece of code anywhere within my code to do that, and that is what functions are. And methods are a further derivation of that. So methods are built-in functions that are written by the core Python development team, or basically other users of Python that you can leverage. These are pieces of code that other people have written and integrated into the language that you can leverage. So just like your addition operator, that has already been written by another programmer within Python. And similarly, all of that is basically all of that leads to the fact that basically you can leverage thousands and thousands of libraries with thousands and thousands of methods that already exist and solve problems that you might have. So this is one of the advantages of Python, that it has so many methods already there. You probably don't just need to find the exact method to do what you want and use that instead. So that is one of the benefits of Python. So with that in our head, let's move on to the next thing that you need to learn within the fundamentals of the language. The first step, basically, keep in mind this is the first step of learning Python. We're going over the different things you need to learn in this first step, and then we'll go over the next steps basically. And this is the roadmap I would take if I didn't know Python today, and I would need to get to the place where I know Python and I am able to get a six-figure job through Python, right? So after that, another important thing within programming that you might want to learn after this, and it might take a lot of time, to be honest. I think we might have to change the timeline of 2 to 3 weeks to I think 2 to 3 months here. Let's make this 2 to 3 months, because it might be difficult to get really good at Python. This erase tool isn't working. Yeah, here it goes. I think they changed the erase tools usage. So one thing you need to remember here is that object-oriented programming might take a lot of time. So working with, and all of these things that I talked about, all of these fundamentals that we are talking about here, right, or will talk about next, or will, must come with the learning of these things, must come basically practical assignments of each of these. You practically code out different things using these concepts. So while you're learning, then you need to do practical things. So that practical core scripts for that, just to see if you can do that and basically internalize the knowledge. With that in your head, you need to remember that 2 to 3 months is still a conservative estimate of what amount of time you might have to take. So coming back to OOP, object-oriented programming here. So this is a programming paradigm in Python. There's functional programming and other sort of programming there as well. But we're going to focus on object-oriented programming because that is something that is used the most. So with object-oriented programming, you must remember that you need to spend some time going over and learning how object-oriented programming works, how you set up objects, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go too deep into it because that's a it would be a very long video just going over object-oriented programming, but as the next thing you need to learn if you want to get good at programming. And the last thing in the fundamentals that you should focus on in this particular phase is error handling and debugging, right? So this is the last phase. So any code that you write is going to be strife with bugs and issues, and you need to basically solve those bugs, and that is basically during when you're coding and after you're coding, because you might get bugs in all levels. Let me give you an example, right? When I started coding, right, the biggest issue I had initially was I was using a practical experience, right? So I started doing practical projects and learning practically things. But the issue that popped up with that is that I completed a project. I had bugs when I was developing a logic. I solved those bugs. I'm good. The software is working fine. I added a slight new feature to the software and worked on the bugs in that particular feature. Resolved that. Everything is working perfectly. But when I go back to the previous feature, I realize everything is short. Everything is not working. So programming is a constant battle of handling errors that will come. So while you're learning these fundamentals, the fundamental handling your errors and debugging your code are very essential to learn, because you cannot code anything without learning this process. The point is, even if you're an experienced programmer, at a stage when you develop one feature and add another feature, you'll see everything breaks. So to solve that, you need to be very familiar with the process of error handling and debugging. So now that we have learned let's say the fundamentals of the language, let's change our color and use some other color here. So now that we've learned the fundamentals, what is the next thing that we need to do? Right, now that you learned how programming languages, you learned the nuts and bolts of Python itself, what is the next thing? Next thing is you need to look into specializations. That is point number 2. You need to focus on specializations. Now this might not have been important if we go back to 3-4 years ago. Most people were able to find really good jobs by just learning Python, right? But the issue is markets change, right? The massive layoffs that we had in the IT industry, the emergence of AI technologies, all of that has led to the fact that basic rudimentary coders who just know the fundamentals of their programming language are not needed in the market anymore. The market now requires specialists, right? And to become a specialist, you need to imagine and put 5 to 6 months of your time for this particular portion. You need to focus on 5 to 6 months of your time, completely focused on specializing in your field. So you spend 3 months learning the core nuts and bolts and writing scripts to practice those fundamentals of Python. Then you get to the specialization. You need to specialize in a certain field in Python that interests you, that you like, and get good at it. I'm saying 5 to 6 months, but it's less for some fields and much more for other fields. Like with AI, it could even stretch to 7 or 8 months because AI requires a lot of statistical knowledge as well as mathematics. So honestly, if you're just here to make 6 figures, that's probably not the way to go. AI, while it may pay as much more than 6 figures, at the same time, the foundations and the knowledge required to build AIs is equally as high. So when we talk about specializations, let's start one by one with different specializations you can do. So the first one we can think is data science and uh, data science and machine learning. Now this is also difficult and technical. It's somewhat easier compared to AI, but again, this also requires a knowledge of statistics, right? So you can easily do this using, let me use a different color here. You can easily do this by learning libraries like pandas, numpy, and scikit-learn, which help you for which is a go-to tools and frameworks uh, for machine learning and data science. But the issue is that learning just imagine you know how to let's look at this in this way. Someone who knows uh, how to design a car, design the engine, might necessarily not know how to uh, create that engine itself. At the same time, a person who's creating or manufacturing that engine probably does not understand what are the fundamental principles going behind designing and creating that engine. So you're that mechanic who probably knows how to uh, assemble an engine. At the same time, that if you don't if you learn about pandas and numpy, these languages, right? Pandas and NumPy, these are the different languages that are used in machine learning and data science within Python. But the issue is that you might become that manufacturer who can assemble things, but he doesn't understand what the foundation going behind that. But to become a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, you have to understand the theoretical principles going behind that to create these softwares, because you're not going to be just in the role of just simply throwing things together when someone gives you what to throw together. You'll be there in the role to design as well. So that is important in this particular field. You need to spend time to learn statistics and other such fields. So that is particularly a challenge if you want to go to this specialization. And you can easily say that this would take 6 to 7 months. Again, like I'm saying 5 to 6 months on the top on average, but 6 to 7 months might be not. Yeah, I think 5 to 6 months is more than enough for data science and machine learning, right? Uh, yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's still 6 to 7 months minimum, and I'm being very very conservative with the time here. Uh, so with that, let's potentially see what is the second specialization you could do. Second specialization in Python that you could focus on is what's probably the most common one, and probably the one that is the most easiest one and the most quickest one. You can probably get good at it in I think 3 to 4 months. Yeah, so it's web development, right? And you can do it with many languages, but with Python it becomes even easier. So you can focus on that. So this should be again 3 to 4 months, right? Learning how to design websites, learning how to develop web applications, so on and so forth. And the good thing about this is, while it's popular, it's equally high in demand. So you can easily command a 6-figure salary by just learning frameworks like Django and Flask, which can help you build web applications quickly. And if you go to potentially, if you go to full stack level, you might even command a higher end language. So you need to learn frameworks like Django and 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 Flask to get good at it. Ultimately, Django is the most important, so focus on that. So it's very easy, and it's just all these websites, all these applications that you see on the web. The web developers basically design them, and it's high in demand, and it's easier to learn compared to the other specializations I talked about. And you can easily command a six-figure salary based on that. So with that out of the way, the next thing is automating and scripting. Now this one is slightly more challenging. At the same time, it is not that difficult. So if you have a good command in in the fundamentals of Python that you just learned, then you shouldn't have trouble with this. This isn't going to it isn't going to be difficult, and this field is becoming more high in demand over the years because uh, you know uh, a lot of companies now want to automate their processes. So basically automation is going to take you places, and it doesn't require you to learn any additional processes. You just need to understand what you're trying to automate, understand the workflow, and there'll probably be experts telling you exactly what they need to automate, how they can automate that, the logic behind that, and you'll be just the guy who has the logic and he needs to implement that in Python. uh, Basically, automation experts help you streamline company processes, making them, making reducing human input into processes as little as possible. And a lot of businesses are willing to pay a lot of money if you're able to automate their processes, because it reduces long-term employee costs and increases efficiencies. So this is a very emerging but a very in-demand field, and this doesn't require you to learn any additional frameworks, languages, so on and so forth. It just focuses on getting really good at the fundamentals of Python, and then practicing actually automating different things, and then being able to do that. So automation is a good field to focus on. And then last we go to AI and robotics. Now this field, I'm gonna easily tell you, you need to remember that AI is something, if you want to get into this, you should easily make it 7 to 8 months. That's how long it's gonna take you to get any good at it, and anywhere near to become employable in it. You need to learn statistics, you need to learn different specific data science principles that I talked about before, um, all of that. And the thing is, all of this is the preferred language for AI is always been Python, just like data science. So data science is basically, if you want to become an AI specialist, you'd probably need to really become good at data science and machine learning, as we've discussed previously. Spend 6-7 months on that, and then a month or two basically linking that with how to create AIs and so on and so forth. Honestly, if you want my recommendation, if you're going the data science and machine learning route, spend some time after that while you get your job to actually learn about AI and robotics as well. That would act as a multiplier on top of your ability to basically uh, you know uh, to increase your earning potential even more. So now that we understand that there are certain specializations we need to do, the next thing we need to focus on is basically uh, the third part basically what we need to do. You've learned a lot at this stage. You've learned the fundamentals of the language, and you've learned how to basically how to basically how you have learned the fundamentals of Python, become really good at coding Python 2 to 3 months. Then you spend 5 to 6 months, or probably more if you're going data science or AI route, getting specialized in your particular field. Now you're in a position where you are very in tune with the job market, and as long as you're in tune with the skill set needed by the job market, you're going to make six figures. But how do you prove that to the market? I'm going to presume that you're going to self-learn all of that. You're not coming out of a university, you're not coming out of a boot camp, so on and so forth, right? You can be like, let's just keep universities in mind. If you're coming out of a university, that's fine. If you're coming out of boot camp, it doesn't matter whether you self-learn or come out of a boot camp. At the end of the day, getting a job for you is difficult because company needs a way to verify your skill set. Now, how do you do that? You build a portfolio of your projects first, and this is the first step to skill verification. So you need to build a portfolio of your ability to get things done, right? So once you have a portfolio, you can share that with people, different people, employers, and they can see your actual ability to build stuff, right? And portfolios are not the scripts that you built during the fundamental stage or the different small projects that you did during the specialization phase, right? Because you need to constantly actually practically create stuff between both phases to actually get good at it. Portfolios are basically entire projects, right? So you build, if you're in web development, you build the entire Airbnb platform or the Amazon platform or the Facebook platform to show your ability to actually create these entire complicated websites on your own. Not as refined as obviously the final product there, because hundreds and thousands of people build those platforms out, but at least something that gets the core features implemented, right? You need to build those projects to showcase your experience and ability to create those projects, right? So if you're in machine learning, right? Let's say you need to build a machine learning model to predict stocks, right? If you are in web development, you need to build something like Airbnb or Facebook platform using Django, right? And if you are in automation, you build automation scripts for data extraction, processing, cleaning data, filtering data, analyzing data, all of that, right? So all of these, you need to have complete projects doing this to showcase your ability to do that, right? That's the first step, right? Building your portfolio. But after your portfolio, that's probably not going to be enough, because a lot of people do actually build their portfolio. So after that, the fourth step would be for you to, quite simply, the fourth thing you can do is work on open source software. There, this is gone a little bit out of control. So OS contributions, right? So you need to do contributions and open source softwares. And what are open source softwares? Basically, these are softwares on GitHub where individuals or programmers such as yourselves can go and look up the thousands of bugs that are highlighted by the project owner or the project team. So open source software, these are these are softwares whose code base is accessible to anyone in the marketplace to use. But mainly it's there for people to contribute their opinions about some problem or some issue, add a feature, and remove bugs, solve problems in a project that's basically contributed and built up by not just the core team, but the entire community around that team, right? So if you do open source contributions, that is one of the most effective ways you can get attention from a recruiter, because open source software contributions mimic actual coding environments. You're working with a wider team in open source softwares which you don't have direct contact with, and you find a bug, you solve that bug, and you work with them to get that bug implemented actually in the main code base, right? So that is what you do in your work as well. So for companies, this is a very, very important thing that attacks on top of your portfolio, letting people know that you're competent, right? Another thing that you could do, fifth thing, is to get certifications. So I mean, other than that, like if possible, you can find some certifications that you can quickly do after the first two steps that can help you, showcase your ability that you actually know how to work with Python. It could be boot camps, or it could be some smaller certifications that can show your ability. For example, we have professional machine learning engineer certification by Google. Then we have the AI engineer by Microsoft Azure, and Python Institute certifications about basic Python language abilities. So there are also advanced courses that you can do. You can do online programs, so on and so forth, but I wouldn't recommend wasting your time and money on that. So after that, now that you have completely set yourself up for getting a job on your end, the next thing you need to do is freelance. You need to go among people and network. So you need to network and freelance. So what do I mean by network and freelance? Network and freelance are two different things. So if you want to work in the traditional space, like get experience and ultimately work in companies like Microsoft and Google, you need practical experience. For practical experience, you need to break into the market, and the best way to do that is through networking with existing engineers and see if you can get opportunity to work in one of those companies. That's the first thing you can do, right? Network with people, and ultimately you'll be able to find a job within that networking circle that you create of programmers. But if you want to go another route, that is working from home, that is freelancing, right? So you focus on freelancing, finding contracts online and completing those contracts and building your reputation up in the freelance marketplace. That at a certain stage you become, you get enough freelance contracts that you don't need to actually do or get a remote job that can help you do all of that basically. So Python related communities on GitHub, Reddit, and LinkedIn help a lot, and platforms like Upwork and Fiverr can also opportunities for you to make six figures using freelancing contracts and freelancing jobs. So with that out of the way, potentially at this stage we need to understand that the final thing is you get an offer. What do you do at that stage? You don't understand what you want to do. You get confused, right? At that stage, the final thing you need to focus up is you need to learn how to negotiate, right? Because ultimately after this 1 year sprint that you did with specializations and learning to program, you can negotiate your salary however you want. You put in the time and effort to learn enough skills that everybody would want. You're in high demand. At this stage, you can negotiate because everybody's going to lowball you. If they can get someone of your caliber who went through all this process for a less amount of money, they're going to do that, right? Nobody's going to give you what you want. You need to negotiate with these people and to negotiate, you always need to remember you're in a position of strength. People of your caliber who are specialized, who are really good at Python, have specialized, have done open source contributions, have a really good portfolio. They need to negotiate a higher salary for them, and they'll get that because you are in high demand as a specialist who has experience of portfolio and open source contributions as well as certifications. So with that, we're going to wrap this video up, and I'm just going to add at the end that we need to always update ourselves. Like once you're done, don't forget your journey of learning Python is done. You need to be constantly evolving and updating yourself with the knowledge of Python, because new libraries and frameworks in Python always get updated. You need to understand latest technology and their trends. You might need to switch from Python if a new language that is more easy or more used comes in. So if you're getting into the technology sector, always remember, be constantly updated with what is changing in your sector, right? So with that, we're going to wrap this video up, and we'll see you in our next video. Thank you.